Everybody get the notice we're recording? Yes.
Yeah, it's on.
All right. This is the SIG Network regular meeting. It is Thursday, December 22nd of 2022, the last meeting of the year. We are recording. As usual, the CNCF Code of Conduct applies here, which boils down to don't be a jerk. Welcome, everybody. Attendance is low today. We were just starting to discuss whether we want to postpone some of the agenda items until attendance is higher. Mache, if you think it's interesting to give an overview for folks here, I'm totally supportive if you want to do it. If you want to just punt it and save it for the next meeting, that is fine too.
I think we can. Since depending on how much time we're gonna have left, right? I can mention about this, and then we can continue on the next meeting.
Well, we have a very light agenda today, so
Anyway,
I expect
okay.
we'll have plenty of time left. But again, it's up to you whether you want to use today to talk to the 10 or so people who are here, or whether you want to save it for the usual attendance, which is more like 40 to 70, right?
So almost everyone that's here is pretty engaged in the multi-networking, I think.
That's true. So maybe we need more audience, because I think we have most of here. It's regular that we all come up with this design, this stuff. So you're right. Let's maybe punt it to the next one.
Okay. All right. You have edit on the agenda, right? So
Yeah.
Go ahead and just move yourself to the next section. We'll start with triage. I will share. Give me 1 second. Share my screen. Issues KK.
We lost your audio, Tim.
Yeah, you're
I
muted.
did.
Yeah, he's muted.
Okay, I was scared that it was.
Yep.
We can hear something, yes.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry. Zoom decides when you share a screen, it's going to mute your mic because the screen might share. Sorry. So starting issues. With this one, Lars, I don't see Lars here. This is an issue to add a new IPVS scheduler algorithm. Lars makes a proposal here to just make it a string and stop trying to validate it and just trust that the user who's configuring the node knows enough to configure a load balancer algorithm that works. I'm fine with that. I think it shouldn't be our business to adjudicate which ones you can or can't use. So he's going to make a PR for that. I just wanted to share it with the group because I thought it was notable. Next, Win kernel kube proxy. I don't know who gets assigned Win kernel kube proxy issues. Does anybody know?
A bunch of PRs, and last meeting, Bridget says that she was trying to find someone.
Okay, we'll leave this for now and see who wants it. We can come back to it if we need to. Next time.
Are you sharing the issues? Because I see only the main page with the open issues.
What? Oh,
Are
really?
you switching between issues, or because
Yeah,
you
I
are talking
am.
about one?
Right, hold
No,
on a second. Let me try again.
I only see in the list.
Sorry. Oh, because I selected Chrome tab. Sorry. How about now? Better?
This person was submitting a lot of PRs. We talked, and Bridget said that she was going to try to find someone.
Okay.
Also, Jay was announcing or promoting that they were going to move this out of 3. I mean, I really.
That's true. I didn't want to assign it. I didn't want to assign it to somebody without asking them. So I thought we would bring it here. But if nobody here wants this one, then we'll save it for next time. Next.
Zappa.
Next, FQDN endpoint slices. We had this is a request for, what does it mean? We had added it on the thought that it would be useful in a general purpose sense, but we never defined it well enough, and maybe we just shouldn't. So the proposal here was just add some API warnings when somebody uses it, since we're all in on API warnings these days.
I was going to say that we should have started that before some time ago.
We've opened a can of worms, but it's a good can of worms, adding these API warnings. So I think this one's resolved. I just wanted to bring it up here, and in fact, I will triage accept it.
And this is very straightforward for new contributors or people that are looking for something. I mean,
so I labeled it help wanted. I got sort of scolded before for labeling things good first issue that weren't obviously good first issues, that were more complicated. There's actually apparently rules. I have to go reread the rules before I label it good first issue. So, but this is a relatively easy one for anybody who wants to jump on and get a PR under their belt and start working towards org membership. This one I wanted to bring to the group for some discussion. I know not a lot of people are here, but so maybe we won't close it if we decide, but it was worth discussing. The proposal or the request is to add some sort of API that lets us configure the default DNS when the policy is cluster first. So basically a pod that doesn't say anything about DNS, they get the cluster first policy. The cluster first policy is basically hard coded in the container runtimes. And this is a request to add an API to make that configurable. This is the first time I've really heard this request, so not a whole lot of demand for it. It seems like a lot of work for relatively low return.
I don't understand. What's the goal of this?
Like, suppose you don't want NDOTS 5 by default. You want NDOTS 2 by default for everybody. This would allow you to specify that. Today, you can specify that per pod, right? So if you want to set a policy for all of your cluster, you have to go set a webhook and then modify every pod on the way in. That's pretty tedious. So this is asking for, can we just have an API for it? But we don't have a really good way to add configuration stanzas for the cluster, right? Like there's the general
DNS. Actually, the name server is a flag in kubelet. It's hardcode.
Yeah, we don't have.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Would you want to be able to do it per namespace and so on? I mean, just not the cluster to set it.
Exactly. Once we open the can of worms, then it will become, can I have it per namespace? Can I have it per namespace and pod selector? And we'll be in the business of building a whole config API, which I'm not inherently against, but I just don't see a lot of demand for it.
We don't have many bags of DNS, so
yeah.
I will keep it.
While it's stable, don't touch it. So I wanted to bring this up for the group because, like I said, I'm not inherently against it. And if somebody wanted to go and start thinking about this, either this specifically or the sort of more general problem of how to do configuration of the cluster itself, I wouldn't tell people not to do it, but I'm not gonna go champion it. I don't think it's
because if you do this, I mean, not just where you want to do it, there's probably a whole other slew of things you want to be able to configure.
Yes, well, it is a can of worms. And in fact, if we had done this at the beginning, we probably would have ended up with something that looks like a config map, but with, or with a schema. And we would have had a field that said cluster cider and a field that said service cider. And now we know that those would have been inappropriate. We don't want them to be a single cluster configuration. We actually need them to be more flexible than that.
Yeah.
So we would have made bad choices if we'd done it the sort of naive way. And I worry that that's going to be true no matter what we look at. So I'll leave this open. We can touch on it again when there's more attendance. But my inclination is to close this issue and just say unlikely to happen. We have a test flake Antonio, you were the last person to comment on it about node ports. Do you remember this one? Should we close it? I didn't get the full context.
Is this about node ports?
PowerPC.
Okay, so that's I've been how can I say chased by node ports during the last month. We and it seems that in the Kubernetes origins, everything used external IPs as default, right? And a lot of tests has this check, use external IP. Then it seems that external IP never wasn't always available, so it has a fallback to internal IP. But there are a lot of tests that assume external IPs. And all the node port tests, at least the ones that were running in GCE, I don't know how they were working. Maybe they have connected the projects or something and the VPCs, because you cannot reach the node port from the test runs from the E2E test binary, okay? That runs in a pod or runs in the customer thing or whatever. And the cluster may be running in a different project, in a different data center or whatever. So that test only works when the E2E test binary has connection to the nodes. And some I was moving all these tests to internal IPs, and I don't know if these people is facing this problem.
I see. Because it seems like it only was flaking on PowerPC, which makes it even weirder.
Well, that Wojtek from Scalability pinged me this week because all the scalability tests started to fail on node ports, and I had another internal bug about this, and I don't know. I mean, I will try to follow up because they were. It's probably that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we should not rely on connectivity from the test execution engine to the nodes themselves. We should run a pod that runs the test.
Right, that's the goal. I mean, all the tests should be hermetic, and a lot of effort was done in moving everything to test within the cluster. But there are tests that you don't know until they fail.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you're already assigned to this one, so.
Yeah, I will follow up.
Thanks. We're back into older issues. This is the multiple node IPs in dual stack issue. I won't rehash it here. Dan's not here to talk about it. That's it for triage. I left these two issues open because they were my item on the agenda, and since I'm next, I'll just jump to my item. There was this KEP that was opened, which was make it possible to disable cluster IP when you set type load balancer, which seems consistent with the make it possible to disable node ports when you enable load balancer. But the question is, do we really want to do this? And I thought it was worth bringing to the group. My own feeling is that it's not, cluster IPs are not nearly as limited of a resource as node ports are in general. And I'm not sure that we want to add all of these extra parameters. Like, it's more API surface, more test cases, more combinations of stuff. I've never heard this asked before. And so my inclination was to say, we're not going to do this right now. And in fact, if we want something like this, this is what Gateway API is better for.
We also have this issue with cluster IP, that you have a cluster IP service, you move to external name, and no, what is it? Yeah, you have a cluster IP service with IPX. You move to external name, you drop the cluster IPX, and then you move again from external name to cluster IP, and you can assign whatever IP you want. So you can do this double hop and replace an IP. It's a nice trick. Replace an IP in a service that in theory shouldn't be allowed.
Yes.
And if we add this other corner case, I don't think that we can cover it.
So,
Yeah,
so if I have a load balancer, external load balancer, I sort of control what's getting routed to that entrance point. And if I just wouldn't sort of let cluster IP traffic coming in, then it would only be accessible inside of the cluster, right? So do you really need to turn it on? I think I can just block it from sort of leaking out.
Yeah, you can use network policy to block it. It's less about security, this request, and it's more about contended resources. They have a small service cider. But I'd rather put our energy into Gateway and say, look, Gateway is really good for
For
this.
sure.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. If Gateway,
Yeah.
based on what Rob was saying here, like if Gateway can do this exact same thing, why do it here? Because I've never heard of the cluster IP pool being limited. In line with what you said, Tim. That's weird.
As someone that worked with IP, I would much rather sort of see how to avoid Kubernetes cluster from typically use Masquerade also for V6, not just for V4, right? But I mean, it's not really Kubernetes, it's actually the person that starts the cluster that creates these problem. If you don't own considers, it's hard.
Yeah.
Is this person's use case, he wants to do his like ECMP on layer 3, which then gateway API, what that's saying is layer 4?
Are you pulling that from somewhere in the conversation?
I'm just making the assumption that's what he's trying to do, and he wants to do this on layer 3 and not layer 4. And if gateway API is layer 4, then that doesn't satisfy his needs. But then having a very small cluster service cider range is, I'd like to understand why it's so small.
Yeah.
Especially when it's internal.
Yeah, I mean, it can literally, it can be anything. Sorry, Lars, go ahead.
16 addresses or something like that on some sort of non-commercial address, and you want your pods to talk out. I don't know.
But the service cider is intended to be cluster private. Like,
Yeah,
there's,
exactly.
I know some people do route it, but I don't think that's a great
So
idea in general.
if it's internal, right? Why wouldn't you use sort of an overloadable address?
Yeah.
Yes. It could be link local. I mean, that's probably a bad idea, but it could be any of the RFC 1918s. It could be public IPs, that you're never going to access.
You have all this self-serve. I mean, the IPv6. If you use IPv6, you can just do a random 48-bit, right, and insert and use the FD or FC08 or whatever it's called. No, FD,
Exactly.
8 bits.
Okay, cool. Then it seems like everybody's sort of agreeing. I'll add some comments to this, and then I'll go ahead and close it.
Shane, you have your hands up.
Oh, sorry. Is there a hand?
Yep, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add flavor to the gateway API thing, but so what Rob's referring to is our desire to eventually have you be able to create a gateway and have IP, like load balancer IP provisioning, similar to what you get for service. A lot of implementations just use service for this today under the hood. That is going to be a long ways out. That is definitely not happening in any kind of short order. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But by the time it's out, I imagine they could probably like redeploy their cluster with a bigger sitter.
And typically, the problem is not for incoming traffic. It is how to make sure that that a pod can reach out, right, and that the traffic can come back. And then it's, I mean, either you have that address routable all the way back, or you hope that you can masquerade to something that is routable from the outside.
I am not sure that I caught the question. I'm sorry to say. Could we try that one more time? I apologize.
No, I said the problem is not how to reach a sort of a service or something like that, but more rather when a pod tries to reach out, and that the pod can be reached from the outside, really, either because even if you use OK addresses, is the routing set up so that you can reach back to the pod? Typically, many systems masquerade this into to another address, right? That is routable from the outside, because most systems there don't know sort of on which pod a particular, on which node a particular pod address space is running. So you need to get, so you don't set up the routes on the outside in many systems.
So I still think that's a case for Gateway API though. I saw something internally from a customer who had wanted something similar. And I said, this feels like a good use case for a custom gateway class with your own implementation that knows how to attract traffic through some other mechanism at L3 probably, and knows how to program it on the nodes, and it's completely opaque to Kubernetes itself what's happening, except that there's a gateway of a particular class and it points to a service or a pod. And so I think that this is what I'm hoping personally, as a very selfish person, I'm hoping Gateway gives us, is that we can stop considering new features for service and instead say, this seems like a good use for Gateway. So Shane, even if it takes a while to get to the place where L4 external LB provisioning works in the same way, I'm still okay with it as a direction. Although I'm curious why you think it'll be so long. Is it just priorities, or is there some technical complication?
I just get the, first of all, I agree with you. I don't think that we should be, I think that we should be aiming for Gateway for these kinds of things. But when I say so long, I mean, 6 months to a year out kind of territory. And it just seems like, if I'm understanding their problem correctly, this is like an immediate kind of problem that they're looking for, like an immediate kind of fix for. So I agree. That's the only reason why I pointed out the time length, because if they're running out of IPs in a production cluster, and that's prompted them to make a KEP, then they're looking for some kind of at least mitigation. They thought this would be something that you could just turn on and then they could go on with their current running cluster. But
the reality is, even if we accepted this KEP, it would best case go alpha 27, beta
exactly.
GA, beta in 28, GA 29 will be in January of 2024 before they can actually turn this on in a brand new cluster. Then they have to upgrade to that 1.29 cluster first, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Realistically, like, it's a 2-year cycle before most customers are able to accept this KEP. So it's not going to help their urgent problems.
So I'm wondering if maybe it'd be useful for us to take the time to make sure that we're understanding where they're coming from. Like, I haven't read this entire thing clearly, but just talked about it with you guys on this call. Like, is there more to it? Like, is there something else that we might be able to do for them in the short term? Because it feels weird that they're coming in here with, like, we're running out of IPs in our sitter. We're not willing to change that. Please change Kubernetes for us and we'll upgrade to get that. Like, it's just a little strange.
I put the link in the chat here, so anybody who wants to go engage can. Sorry,
I just read it, and I mean, especially the last one was like, no, I don't want to have one IP address go to the to this internal service and another IP address go to the load balancer address. I mean, first, they don't have to come from the same CIDRs, right? So I have very little understanding for why he would want to do this. I mean, the very last one you had, or maybe where we were before, when it talked about that the basically kubeproxy takes one address and then the load balancer takes another one, and he's running out of addresses. So it's how the system works.
So I agree with closing it as was originally suggested. I've subscribed to the issue, and I will try to, like, if they come back with, all right, well, we'll go engage with Gateway, I'll try to follow up with them. If they come back with, we really don't want to do that, maybe I'll take the time to try to dig in a little bit further into why and see if there's more to it.
Awesome.
Something else we can do for them.
Okay. Then I'm done. Where did your window go? There you are. I'm going to stop sharing. And
I threw one more thing on the agenda while you were talking. That's all right.
Let's go for it.
Just because, why not? It's about to be holiday. So we're just looking more review on this PR regarding kubeproxy libs. So kind of like where we're going with all the Kaping stuff. We've kind of reconsolidated and decided, like, let's start small. Let's start by breaking out some of the shared kubeproxy code into staging, and then, down the line, we can start incrementally maybe fixing stuff, replacing stuff, adding functionality. And so that's what this KEP is starting to hint at. I'd say the KEP isn't like fully done, but it's in a state where we like want to get opinions on it from folks so that we can kind of steer the rest of the KEP. I think that's really the spiel I have for that. It's also relevant to this other KEP, which is involved moving bits out of the endpoint slice controller into staging. So I think like they're fairly aligned in that they're both literally just looking to move code from core into staging. And so, you know, these two will kind of set the stage for how we do that in the future. So yeah, that's really the spiel I have on it.
But what code of core is going to move to process? I think that are not different directions. One is from core to staging, another from external to staging.
At least for the kube proxy code, we were thinking like mainly all the shared code in kube proxy dash proxy, which is like the client side caching mechanisms and client side informers and clients and stuff along those lines will move to staging. For the endpoint slice controller, I thought it was the same sort of flow, Antonio. It might be different.
No, but because language have a PR and Ricardo had a KEP for moving kube proxy to staging.
Dan had.
I thought that your PR is just it was to add the capping bits to staging.
So it kind of started like that, but based on Dan's review of that KEP, it turned into more like, what can we do now? And the conclusion there was, if we just put bits from Kaping into staging right now, it's just more code for us to maintain, and it's not really like helping kube proxy at all. So Dan was like, why don't we move the kube proxy shared code out of kube proxy into staging to start? Everything stays stable because it's the same code, it's just moved, and then we can start like maybe bringing bits of Kaping in to replace bits of the existing kube proxy code incrementally, so we don't have like one big code change that could lead to breakages.
But what is the difference having in staging and that in 3?
For one thing,
if you want to fix all the kube proxy mess.
Yeah. For one thing, like just right away, folks can vendor it a lot easier. Like if folks want to use the services and endpoints change tracker that's already implemented in core proxy, like then external people can actually use that from day one if they haven't written a client-side caching mechanism. And then our eventual goal would be to make it a lot easier, you know, to provide more tooling to make it easier to write proxies for the future, right? This is just like a little bite of the ultimate goal, because we've learned that like big KEPs are just impossible to get agreement on. And so this is kind of
because you move several times from direction. Okay, I'm sorry. I got lost in the last stage.
Yeah, we've moved a lot, and so the Kaping KEP is still up, but that community is kind of, I think, over updating it and maintaining it. So they told me to go work on this KEP instead, which Jay opened and I'm working on. So yeah, I'm sorry, the path has changed a lot.
In terms of procedural, it looks like this PR is is the PR to implement 2104, KEP 2104. But KEP 2104 is still titled Kube Proxy Architecture. Is that right?
Okay, so what has happened here is Jay didn't make a new issue for this new KEP. He used the existing issue.
That's what I saw.
Yeah, and if you read, I should have mentioned that earlier. Dan mentioned the same thing. I said, I'll go make a new issue, and Jay basically told me to wait until folks comment more. But I'm happy to go make a new issue for this KEP independent.
Well, I'm more asking than telling, right? Like if we want to repurpose 2104 to mean this, then let's go retitle 2104. And you can keep it as is, or if you want to keep 2104 as the overarching goal, and this is a sub goal, then let's make a different enhancement issue.
Okay.
I'm happy to look at. I haven't looked at this CAP yet, this PR yet, but I did flag it for review, so it's on my list. I'm hoping to spend some time over the holidays.
I'm confused with the whole thread about the Go interfaces and the other thing.
So at the end of the day, Antonio, I think our goal is still to have like an interface, a library that folks can use to make writing proxies easier. Like we've just tried to really simplify it in this KEP. Like we've said, like that's our ultimate goal. But the first step in that ultimate goal is just moving bits out slowly from core. Because it just doesn't make sense for us to write a bunch of Kapin code, put it in staging, and none of the core proxies use that. Like it just means that we as a community
agree.
Yeah. Like it means we as a community have a lot to maintain. So the goal more so is to put the code where people can go ahead and vendor it right away to write backends. Like if we move the in-tree shared code to staging, people can vendor the services and endpoints, chain trackers, and caches, right?
Yeah, but I think that for that it would be useful to have. I think that was Tim that said an email. If you want to vendor and expose, to have a good API design there and to put examples on how people is meant to use it. Because if you just put code there, I mean, my experience is that nobody's going to use it. But if you start to, have at least some examples on how to use the library and some design, and I think, didn't you add a document with the interfaces and all these things?
Yep, it's in the KEP. So it literally in the summary section of the KEP, we refer back to the document that Tim made.
Okay. So
talking about a Kapin like interface.
I should read it and stop talking. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's totally all right. And this is why I wanted to bring it up. It's good thought. Like I think I need to expand this KEP a little bit to talk not just about like step one, but what our ultimate goal is a little bit more. We do talk about it a little bit, but we're trying to focus in on like what are the actual operational steps we need to do to get there. And that's where I think we messed up with the original KEP is like we had a bunch of grand scenarios of like we want to make it easier to write backends, but the path to get there wasn't explicit enough. So
okay. So we have some reading to do.
Yeah, and just any comments y'all make, I will update. I have push rights to Jay's branch, so I'm kind of helping out with it.
Okay, great. Since Mache pushed to next cycle, we have no more agenda for today, unless anybody has other business you want to talk about. Okay, I'm adding to the agenda for next meeting to do a KEP review for next release. We can run through the KEP board, make sure that it's up to date and that new incoming KEPs have been added to it. And talk about what people are planning for 27, what moves you want to make, update the target release, target milestones rather, and get progress back on track. Anybody else? Last call for business. Okay, then. Have an excellent holidays. Hopefully everybody takes some time off, work on things that you want to work on instead of things that you have to work on, and or don't work at all, even better. Good luck with the cold out there. It's going to be brutal for some of you. Happy New Year. We'll see you all in 2 weeks' time at our regularly scheduled meeting. We are not missing any.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.